Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to an unusually scheduled Social Science Division seminar. Today's presenter is Matilda Arnell, who's been working in the GIS group for the last 6 months as a visiting researcher collaborator, working with mainly with Alice and myself on some work that we've been doing with the grain quality group, looking at grain quality information, variety traits, and linking that to some of our population and poverty data to get an idea of, if you like, the size of the potential markets out there in terms of what people want from their grain quality for rice. How many people demand a particular trait over another? What are the size of the different market segments out there? So she's been working with us for 6 months. She actually finished working with us last month, and she's back for 1 day only to give this seminar because we couldn't schedule it earlier on due to conflicting time schedules. Now, Matilda's background is she has a bachelor's in an interesting degree in biology and earth science. So it's quite an interesting combination, not just looking at the biology of systems, but also looking at the impacts on landscapes, and also looking at human impact. So she had an interest in both the biophysical and the social aspect of biological systems. And she comes to us from Sweden, and she's actually had 2 really important projects when she's been here. She's only going to present one of them today. The other one isn't finished yet. And she's wondering what I'm talking about. The first one is the grain quality work. But far more importantly is that she's been helping me to trace my family history. That presentation is not quite complete yet. Because it turns out that while I always thought I was from the UK, my family actually come from Sweden. So she's been helping me to trace some of my ancestors. But that'll have to wait for another seminar. So
you pay for the ticket, I'll come back.
That's a deal. Okay, that's a deal. So without further delay, I'd just like to invite Matilda to give her social science seminar on consumer preference and demand for grain quality.
Thank you very much, Henry. So, you're sure I need to turn on my... This? Is it better?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I hear my voice very clearly without. Maybe you don't. Yeah. So as Andy said, I've been working on a study of consumer preference and demand for rice grain quality. Oh, there. And the aim of the study is to contribute to increase the likelihood of new rice varieties being adopted. So by knowing the local preference for different rice grain qualities, we can hopefully better target the development and dissemination of new rice varieties. So the main objectives are map consumer preference for rice grain quality, estimate the demand of these rice grain qualities, which are traits and characteristics, and last but not least, provide a breeding program with a software to visualize all these data. And this is in line with the BRISC product line 5.2, which is to use spatial analysis for effective technology targeting, and the BRISC product 5.2.3, identification and characterization of rice mega environments for effective technology targeting. And I highlighted, or what do you say, mega environments, because to give you an idea that this is really the big pictures. We're talking about continents or at least countries, so it's not on village level, for example. It's much broader picture. And I would like to start with telling you a bit about what rice grain qualities are. Maybe you know, but then you'll get a little recap here. And first, I'll tell you, the focus of the study is the priority countries for IRRI's rice breeding program, which in South Asia are Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, and in Southeast Asia, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. I'm talking too fast? Are you understand? Yeah. Okay. So, rice grain quality is actually determined by a set of rice grain quality traits. And those can be either acquired or genetic. And acquired ones are such as the moisture content of the rice, with cracked grains and stuff like that, which can be acquired. Or they can be genetic traits, which can be physical and chemical. And in this study, we focused on 5 of these traits: size, shape, amylose content, gel consistency, and aroma. The first 2 of these are physical traits. So I'll talk more about them. So this trait can be divided into 4 characteristics, which are short, medium, long, and extra long. And then we have the shape of the rice grain, which can be divided into bold, medium, and slender. And it's actually the ratio of the width and the length. And as you can understand, these characteristics can be combined in many ways. So this probably would be bold and slender, and this would be no. What did I say? Short and bold. Short and bold, and long and slender. So now I'll show you the data that we have on this specific trait, which was provided by the International Network for Quality Rice. And it was Melissa Fitzgerald and Mariette. Yes, sorry. That provided us with this data. So you can say the data we have with the grain size and shape. So there are a lot of combinations. You can have, for example, here, you have short to medium, bold, and slender. So you can have a lot of different combinations. And the other traits are chemical traits. And amylose content is, amylose is kind of starch. And the content of amylose determines if the cooked rice will be dry and flaky or moist and sticky. And if you have low amylose content, waxy here, your rice will be moist and sticky. And if you have high amylose content, your cooked rice will be dry and sticky. Yes. And here is the data for amylose content. You can see, also provided by the International Network for Quality Rice. And the second one is gel consistency, and that is the tendency of cooked rice to harden when you pull it down. And it's actually the length of the gel that will occur when you cool down the rice. So when you cook the rice and pull it down, and if you have a short gel, it will be hard when it cools, and if you have a long gel, it will be soft when it cools. And here's the gel consistency data we use. For example, in the Philippines, you have soft change medium. Do you recognize that? Yeah? Okay.
Malata.
We have good data, sir.
Malata.
And then last we have aroma, which are volatile compounds released when you cook the rice. And there are different ways of characterizing aroma, or I should say that we use this if the rice is aromatic or non-aromatic. Yes?
Can you go back to your previous slide?
Sure.
Is it, where did you get the data? Is it based on the, what terms there is preferred rice gel consistency? Is it from the survey?
From households.
No, it's not from a survey. These people at the International Network for Quality Rice, they have assessed, should I say so? Yeah.
Survey.
Maybe that's from the available rice variety. Characteristics of the available variety.
No, this is based on preference for the specific location. So the experts were asked what they think. The grain quality experts were asked.
Based on
Yeah.
experts.
Yes.
Grain quality.
The members
That's
of
the
the
consumer itself.
no.
I'll come back to that.
No.
Sorry?
How do the experts know?
They did a third.
That's why you're experts.
They're just experts. Just rely on the experts.
If you wonder anything, just ask. We can stop. So aroma, everyone knows what aroma is, okay? And it's the same. The expert has this side, no, so not decided, but okay. So we have all this rice grain quality data, right? And then we wanted to estimate the demand for these different kinds of rice grain qualities, what people prefer and what the demand was. So then we used the following data: the rice grain quality, as I've shown you. Then we used population data, rice consumption data, and rural and urban poverty incidence data. So basically, we took the rice consumption in these areas as an estimate of the demand. So the demand is the rice consumption, okay? This is the population data that we used. It's the gridded population of the world, and to get because we wanted the urban and rural population, we got the extent of urban and rural population. And these both were, we got them from the socioeconomic data and application center. And the rice consumption data is in milled rice equivalent, and kilogram per capita per year. And this we got from the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, and with some additional updates from national sources. Because the FAO data is only national consumption, but we got some data for urban and rural consumption. There's a difference. And here is a map of the rural rice consumption in Asia, or actually in these priority countries and China. So, yeah.
They use the production as a proxy for the rice consumption.
The what?
The production of rice.
No.
This one research. I mean, there's no. Can you go back to your one?
Sorry?
Can you go back to there?
So demand
Forward.
forward.
Forward. Yeah. Your rice consumption. Yeah, that means rice from the production.
No, consumption.
No, it's the consumption. Yeah.
Is it using food consumption?
Sorry?
Food consumption or human consumption?
Yes. Yes. So apart from the consumption data and the population data, we also use some poverty incidence data. And it's in poverty headcount index. And it's actually basically the part of the population that are poor. And it is here, in this part I spend most of my time, I guess, at least half, because there are a lot of poverty data, but for example, the World Bank will only display the poverty data at national level. Since we had more detailed data for the other data sources, we wanted poverty data at subnational level. That means going through heaps of reports from national statistical offices and reports from the World Bank and other sources. So it took a while, but here you can see the map I made from these data. So this is in percentages. So the highest percentages, I guess we have it here in the Philippines.
Yeah.
I think so. For the, well, here. It's actually up to 83% of the population living in poverty in some parts of the region. So we found poverty, I got poverty data for all the countries where we had rice grain quality data. So not only priority countries. So that means you could scale up this this project if you wanted, and not only focus on that. And this is the poverty headcount index at urban poverty line, so the percentage of the urban people living in poverty. And we also have data for Africa and South America. But these are the national poverty lines, since it was very hard to find data broken down into urban and rural for Africa and South America. But it would be easy to update these maps whenever we get better data. So we combine the poverty data with the poverty incidence data, part of the population living in poverty, to get the number of poor people. And with the number of people living in poverty, combined with the rice consumption, we got the demand of the rural and urban poor, an estimate of the demand for the rural and urban poor, and also we did it for the total population. So this is a map of the number of people living in poverty. And to give you a better view, I did some zoom in. That you should ignore this. So here we have rural poverty, number of rural poor in Bangladesh, in Java, and in Luzon. So this is the detail of our data. And we have the number of urban people living in poverty. And also the same zoom in on the urban population. And the map of the rice consumption, like this. Here we have the rural rice consumption. Actually, the rural rice consumption of the rural poor. And the consumption of the urban poor. Okay, so now when we have all these data, here's the estimated of demand, or the consumption of the priority countries in Southeast Asia and South Asia in millions of tons. And I'm missing color. So it's a lot of rice. So then we combine this data with the rice quality preference data. So here we have the number that is consumed, or what is consumed, the different rice grain qualities in the different countries. So for Cambodia, we have only one a combination of quality preference, and for Indonesia we have a lot. So, and here are the rest of the countries in Southeast Asia, and it's the consumption of the rural and urban poor. And as you might guess, we have a lot of data. So we have the demand, the consumption of the rural and urban poor, and here are for the total population in Southeast Asia. So it's a lot of data. And since one of the objectives was to find a good way of visualizing this data, it was to provide the breeding program with a way to visualize these consumer preference data and demand in a good way. So then we used a program which you may or may not have used. It's called Tableau, and I would like to show you now how we visualize this data in Tableau. Okay. Unfortunately, this didn't display very well, but I'll explain to you. So the good thing with Tableau is that you can visualize a lot of data, and the user can decide what part of the data set he or she wants to look at. So here, it doesn't show very well. We have Southeast Asia, right? And then we can also choose a country in Southeast Asia that we want to display. And here we can show the consumption of either the total population, the rural and urban population, or the poor. So here we have the same data of the consumption, but displayed hopefully in an easier way. So we can change, for example, to South Asia. And you will get the consumption in South Asia. And then I also visualize the rice preference data. Like this. So here you can look at different regions or on country level if you'd rather see it on country level, and you can also choose which of the characteristics you want to show. Here. For example, this is where people prefer intermediate amylose in South Asia.
Yeah.
And then combining the rice preference and consumption data, we have the same table. So you can see the combination of rice quality characteristics and by country. And here it shows the consumption. Everyone with me so far? Okay. You're so quiet. And as you can still see, there are still a lot of different combinations, and might be hard to see. So I made a slide where I can show you the rice. The combination of rice preferences, which has the highest consumption.
So these are the biggest market segments, essentially,
Yes.
in terms of reported preference.
For example, now displayed very badly, but here, for example, in Bangladesh, it's 24.7 million tons of this specific rice grain quality combination. So they want this part of the market, if you will, is non-aromatic aroma, high amylose content, intermediate gel consistency, and medium slender size and shape. Yeah. So this is a short presentation of how you can display data in Tableau, and hopefully it can be a good way of sharing data and an interactive and good way to visualize it. And we hope that people will use it.
Matilda, is that can it be uploaded online on a web page?
It can. This is actually, I'm using Tableau Reader, which you can download from the internet. And then you can look at, for example, if I send you a file that I've done, you can look at it in Tableau Reader, but you can't change it.
So it's also download.
Sorry?
You also have to download. You have to upload and download. I have to download it, and I should have this reader in order to have.
Yeah, there is.
But there's no web page.
You can make a web page, but you need a different version of Tableau, which we don't have yet.
Okay.
So
it can be
in
possible.
the future, we could upload this to the internet, and then you can still choose
Just
the
choose
different variables that you want to look at.
But there's no rush because we don't have a website.
We're down.
Yeah.
We have
But
Google
it
Sites.
might be a good tool
Yes, of
for
course.
uploading.
In amylose content, the higher the value, the harder it gets.
Yes.
What does it
Wasn't it? I am. It's moist, and no, it's the higher the amylose content, the harder the rice will be. It will be dry and flaky, but also I think it has to do also with the gel consistency, so it also will be hard when you pull it down if it has a high amylose content. Yeah, so I'll do the last of my presentation. Not much. So we're aware of by doing this sort of when we did this study, we had to make some assumptions that we're aware of. So we assume that the consumer preference, the data that we got, is representative for each geographical unit. But as we get better data, we can update it. And we also assume that consumption is representative of the demand, which may or may not be so. And we assume that the consumption per capita is the same for urban and rural population, and regardless of poverty level, which means that we assume that urban people eat as much rice as rural people, which probably is not true, and that poor people eat more. Yeah, poor people probably eat more rice, or eat more rice than not poor people. But also there, when we get better data, we'll be able to update and make this a better assumptions for estimates. So this is a small summary of media. No, I'll take this one instead. So for the future work on this consumption preference and demand, or the market segmentation, we will conduct a market survey to get better consumer preference for the different rice varieties. And Neil, I believe, there you are, yeah, is doing producer preference for rice varieties. So there are existing farms surveys, and we will identify characteristics of preferred rice varieties in terms of grain quality, agronomic traits, yield potential, maturity, and stress tolerance. And we will also do maps of major rice growing areas suffering from abiotic and biotic stresses, like temperature stresses, drought, submergence, flooding, and pests and diseases. Yeah. This is what I had to say. Do you have any questions? Yeah.
David.
First, I have to apologize for coming a little bit late, so I don't know if any of these questions would already be covered, but I think your data on preferences are coming from the breeders in our partner countries, right? The expert opinion. I think that's, as I understand, Melissa Fitzgerald's data, if those are what I used here. Is that correct?
Yeah, from the grain quality.
Yeah, so they're basically the opinions of the breeders. So
No, it's not breeders, it's the experts of the grain quality.
okay, experts in the grain quality. I guess it raises a couple of questions. I mean, one is, you know, if our partner countries actually have a very good understanding of grain quality in the target markets, first of all, is it really our, you know, that means that if they have the better understanding, maybe they're the ones who should be doing the downstream breeding work in terms of adapting varieties to local conditions anyway. And then the second question would be is, you know, the clear indicator in terms of preference is going to be differences in grain price by grain type and local circumstance. If, you know, if the variety has a higher selling price, that's going to reflect the value of the traits to the consumer. So, you know, wouldn't the logical way to go about this be to inventory the local market prices for different varieties with different characteristics and use that as a way of doing regressions of the characteristics against the local prices to find out, you know, what characteristics are preferred? I mean, I think we also risk something here in that if also a lot of these standards are set by the quality labs based on the existing patterns of consumption, that may be, you know, that's a constrained preference, right? That people consume what they can afford and what's available. What they may want to consume in terms of their actual preferences may be different from what they have the ability to consume.
Yes, but I believe that will be the aim of the market survey that will be conducted. Would you have any further?
That's okay. That's correct. For the first question was about in-country expertise on preference. That's part of what we tried to capture with the data from the Grain Quality Network. Although we realize that it is just one perception of grain quality, there are others which we want to capture through these other assessments which will come. As for why we did this approach is because this was a question posed to us last year by Akin and Darshan. They wanted to know, for all of Asia, what's the market segmentation? As quickly as possible, please. So we started with this approach of just collecting whatever information we had. And Melissa and Faye had done a lot of work through their network to build up this this database on preferences, albeit from a certain select group that may or may not be completely representative of everything that we know about grain quality. So what you've mentioned there is it's valid and it'll come. It'll just take more time to pull together. About price as a grain quality trait. Oh, yes, I mean there is for sure a segment of the population where price trumps everything. You know, you buy what you can afford when you can afford. And we will look at that. The market survey will certainly tell us a lot about what, for a particular group of consumers, what is their most important consideration of purchasing price. And we'll try to get an estimate of, again, the distribution of these different household types. So that will come in time. So there are certainly going to be different data sets going into it to give us an idea of these different segments. I think you had another question there about do our local partners know better? There is some information out there, but nothing that gives us an overall picture that we were trying to do here as a first step. I wouldn't focus too much on the size of the segments here. What we're interested in here is how can we take this very complicated information on these many different things, and when we include all these other stresses, temperature stress, drought, pest and disease, all these different combinations come together, and how do we present that to the breeding farmer? And so we're trying to come up with a tool that allows them to quite simply visualize all these different and quite complicated combinations in a way that will actually be useful for them to say, oh, here's a market segment that we hadn't thought about before. We're not focusing enough of our attention on this particular trait or in this particular region. So it's kind of a data mining tool to make sure that what we are proposing in our breeding program and in terms of our capacity building, perhaps for other breeding programs, are we looking at the right things? Sorry, that was a very long answer.
What has been the reaction of the plant breeders to this?
Have you showed it to them?
Yes. We did. We had a useful discussion with IRRI. And I think he even used some of this in his Thursday seminar. Of course, IRRI comes from a private sector background, so this kind of market research is very important to him, and this is what he wants to pursue. We had a very interesting discovery a few months ago where we found some companies who were selling market research. So we bought some of their reports. It wasn't worth the money it was printed on. It was really distressingly poor. The kind of information that they were selling. $600 we paid?
Yes, $600.
$600 for a 2-page PDF. One graph per page. And so when you look at some of the market research information out there, it's not much. So on one hand, I'm sure there is good knowledge in the different countries, but getting hold of that is really challenging.
Just to clarify what one part of my question was, it was about prices as a representation of the value of different traits to a consumer in terms of preference, because that's what I meant in terms of prices. I think it's in terms of purchases, not for seed, but purchases for consumption, to the degree to which the market determines the price. If there's a price premium, that means the grain quality within a particular locality. Of course, the problem is going to be that this is contrary to really benefiting the poor, because the poor will not be buying the premium grain types, but in terms of figuring out what is actually really preferred, doing regressions of rival characteristics against price, I think is probably a valuable thing.
This was done in the 80s, in the 90s by IRRI for different countries. And perhaps it's good to have a look at it now because a lot has changed since I understand. Because we made a map before we had this. We made a preliminary map based on those studies, and we showed it to Melissa early on, and she said this is not correct. So maybe a lot has changed since then. So that's why we just one. But But as Andy mentioned, before we can do that, it would take a lot of time, and we cannot do that everywhere because it's expensive to do that kind of analysis. But we will do that in some areas, but not at this scale, for instance.
I mean, it depends on what you need for your market price information, but also in many countries there's a very good sense of the price of different varieties. And so that may not be so difficult. We're also, for the SPIA study, we may try and include a component, at least for one country, where we're trying to look at, what are the contributors to in terms of quality of the price.
Yeah, but also like here in the Philippines, there's no single variety. When you go to the market and you buy something, that's not a single variety. What they do is they combine NC222 with IR64 with different percentages. So you really don't know the quality of that rice that people buy. So what you need to do to be able to get the quality is to actually buy those rice and have them analyzed in the laboratory. And that's the only way you can do it. I don't know for other countries, but here in the Philippines, you go to the market, that's not one single variety. They mix it. So then finding out the quality, you would need to do laboratory analysis to be able to do that.
But the household surveys, wouldn't they have data on what varieties the farm household eats and what variety they sell?
I think some of the surveys have information on the disposal for each of the varieties that they grow. So that's something that we can look at because the disposal looks at production and how much is paid to the rent of the owner and the owner of the land and how much is set aside for consumption. So that is probably something that we look at.
This is very interesting. And here, the trader, the miller trader, has a lot of influence. If he knows what people are buying, and so he can influence the farmers in terms of what they plant. So you should continue this and a little bit more.
I think it's a good point. When you look at the chain, from production from producer to the consumer, and there are many different factors involved, many decisions taken. Producers want this, consumers want that, the miller is this middleman. And like you said, it has a lot of things. I think when it comes to doing the survey, we're going to have to look at different actors, if you like, in this chain to try and, even if we just do it for one company, just to get an idea of the information that's right back. Because we don't really have an up-to-date version of that. The last time this was studied, the 80s and 90s, where we had some idea of the different preferences.
And I think you have to look at changes in the preference. Are we liking this particular characteristic, or are we changing? I like Japanese rice very much, but it's awfully expensive.
In Sweden, all rice is very expensive.
Do you eat rice?
Yes. 5 kilos per capita per year. Or was it 7? Was it 5? Not 5. Less than 10. Less than 10.
When you go back, you
can take it in my yearly consumption of rice in my luggage. 5 kilos. Yes?
Just want to ask the ratio of one expert, one expert into one village or one expert into one district?
I don't think it's all at village level, I must say. Because we have some, for big countries, for different regions, say in India, but they're big regions, and for some we just have for countries. So I don't know how many experts were involved. I don't know. Actually,
Because I think if one institution or one expert for each district, there is some variability
Yeah.
within the district that are not captured.
yeah.
It makes sense.
But maybe the local experts would be best to know which variety. But as it might not be. Yeah, there might be better ways of getting this data, but this was the data that we had, so it's what we used.
Last year, Melissa held a workshop here for the brain quality network, and one of the sessions, she got them all to sit down and go through this exercise, to go in as much detail as they could for their respective countries to map out the preferences that they knew. Some of them could do it there and then, so they were busy coloring in these different regions with the different preferences. And others had to go back to their country and do a bit of phone calling and getting information. Phone a friend, essentially, yes. And they were able to do that quite well. They were able to fill in a lot of the gaps. We know it's not complete. We know it's not completely representative, but in terms of getting a good estimate and something that was plausible, it was okay. We know it still has work to do, but in terms of capturing, if you like, the knowledge that existed in the network, it was a good start.
How do plant breeders decide what traits they are going to develop?
They go to the mill and they ask.
The millers know everything.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think now they only look at like those very general characteristics for on stress tolerance, but not so much on brain quality. But in recent years, I think they are starting to concentrate more on brain quality.
But I'm glad we're looking at brain quality now. Before there was no mention of brain quality, just content. Produce.
In terms of improving some of your basic data, each country has an income and expenditure survey, and based on that you can get consumption money. So we actually already have for circa 2005 for all the major countries in Asia, we have expenditure on rice as a share of income, which then you can turn into quantity because it's already been calculated in that way for us. We have it for all the major Asian countries for those below $1.25 a day, purchasing power parity terms, $2 a day, purchasing power parity terms, general population, and then for some countries it's also split rural urban, so 3 countries. So Indonesia, India, and China are all split rural urban in addition to the other splits. So that gives a much more detailed picture. Plus, then there are also a lot of countries as well where you can they already subnationally disaggregate consumption in general too. So in India, for example, they get consumption.
Yeah, in India we have not urban.
But also
Subnational and urban. Yeah. So we have that we got it from some national sources. We have for the Philippines and for India and Laos, I think. But we should update it with the rest of the available data.
The big question that I think that one has to keep in mind, and I think it's a bigger question than we can address here though, is, in terms of how we think the genetic improvement system should work, who should be tailoring things for local preferences? Is it something that we at IRRI should be doing, or is it something that we hope our partners should be doing? Should we be providing pre-breeding inputs into partner centers who can then do the local adaptation to local preferences? Or do we have to do the whole chain ourselves? For me, there's a fairly self-evident answer. It is for bigger countries.
I think it's something that IRRI will have to address I'm sure he is addressing it as he restructures the breeding program. And one of his main goals is to assess, is the direction of the IRRI breeding program, are we on the right course? Are we breeding the right things? Are we addressing the right markets? And are we, what's our comparative advantage? Essentially, what can we do that national programs cannot? I think that's something that is going to evolve. Eagerly await his next Thursday seminar on this to see where it's developing. And the answer should become apparent through that.
Is Phil Rice doing this kind of research?
But for the producer preference, I would share the so I'm not sure about the market segmentation.
The favorite variety when I go to socials and IRRI is 841, which has not been formally released because it's susceptible, but it's wonderful taste.
That's why it's susceptible.
But it's susceptible. But I'm sure it has gotten out. And it's being sold in the market. I don't know how, but it's the favorite.
One comment on measurement of the quality. At retail market, concerning price, the price of rice, of course, the taste and the is important factor to determine the quality and the price of the rice. But at here, local market, what I observe is that proportion of the broken rice is largely determined the price of the rice. And that is considered as a part of the quality of the rice. And also the inclusion of the stone and that is also very important.
Some meaning.
Not only the benefit aspect, the on-target issue can be out of the quality. And I don't know what, it also I think depends on the focus of that. Like if you want to use this study to guide leaders, maybe post-target issue could be controlled aside from benefit. But also you may include the other directions, you may include post-harvest quality control to reflect that in the guides for the breeding or post-harvest technology. That's my comment.
In the data set that we have, the acquired traits were not included. So for the data we have now, we don't have any acquired traits. Yeah, I understand.
But there would also be genetic determinants of also milling recovery rates. It's an interaction between the characteristics of the variety and
What variety is being used as the carrier of golden vitamin A? Do you know? Because they're supposed to put it in the IR64, I think. I don't know, but they're supposed to choose the popular varieties to carry the vitamin A.
In the Philippines, there is an available rice enhancer in the market. They put it in the rice, and the appearance of rice will become like white, then the aroma will change.
Oh, you put in the when you cook it? Yeah, I've seen it. What is it?
Rice.
But what is it? In the back?
then how can this affect your study? Because yes, some of the poor people will buy a low quality rice, and they will put like 2 peso this rice cake, and it enhance the quality of rice.
But in what way? The aroma,
the color, and
the color.
Color.
texture. This is readily available.
Yeah, I've seen it. I've seen it in the market.
So how can this affect you?
I don't know.
That would be an interesting question for our market survey.
We can just start producing this, ship it out. I saw this, but I didn't understand what it was. So it was like a small bag, and you put it in. I didn't get what it was doing. The rest. What is the content?
I think we'll make this the last question.
Yes, I think just one other thing that is kind of maybe also interesting to consider along with this is it is actually in terms of market segment size, it also overlaps a little bit with research priorities. One of the big information gaps actually might be surprising to all of us. We also don't know how much we actually invest in some of these target traits, even, let alone target areas. So I think it will be a challenge to assimilate this kind of information into actual decision making. I've tried to. If you look at the risk, you think that at least you might initially think the risk is fairly straightforward with these things. But you try and look for where does drought fall? You find it's under maybe 8, 10 product lines and spread across 15 different milestones. And we actually don't know how much we spend on drought and salinity or different biotic fluid producers. We don't know how much we spend on blast compared to bacterial leaf, etc. So it is. I think we'll have a long way.
Thank you very much for your questions.